Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world of whispers, warnings and wide eyes. You're 12. Maybe 13. Your hair's been combed with the care of someone preparing for market because, well, that's sort of what's happening. This morning, your mother pulled you aside, away from the other girls who were still trying to stuff crumbs into their aprons before chores. She didn't shout. Medieval warnings rarely came loud. They came folded in laundry, hidden in the folds of veils, breathed over broth, murmured while fingers spun flax. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're seated on a worn stool near the hearth, and she leans close not to scold, but to share. Her breath smells like nettle tea and smoked pork. The hands are rough and warm. And what she says isn't a bedtime story, it's a field guide for survival. First, don't laugh at a man who doesn't know your name. Not because it's rude, but because laughter is a thread. Once it unravels, you might find yourself knotted into a betrothal you never agreed to. The baker's boy once made that mistake. He mistook a girl's laughter for a yes. She now lives on a farm an hour away and hasn't been seen since the harvest moon. Second, beware the lady with soft shoes. Historians still argue whether this referred to noble women, witches or widows with loose morals. Your mother won't clarify. But she insists, if you hear footsteps that don't creak, hide whatever you're holding and never eat what she offers, especially if it's wrapped in silk. Third, if a man gives you a gift, give it to the fire. Unless he's your father or a priest. And even then, be suspicious. Last summer, a girl named Alice accepted a carved wooden comb. A week later, the boy claimed her as promised. No degree, no church. Just a crowd and a rope of flowers. The gift binds the girl, your mother said. Shift uncomfortably. Because you have a gift. A pretty spindle tip, smoothed from bone. It was tucked under your door last week. You told no one. Now it burns in your apron pocket, heavy as guilt. She goes on. If you bleed, and the moon is high and you feel the urge to redundant. This one's more cryptic. She calls it the mother's madness, a fleeting hunger that visits girls. Some say it's the devil. Others say it's freedom. But all agree, if you run that night, you might not return the same. Or at all. Quirky. Maybe. But this belief was real. In 14th century Brittany, a young girl named Isabel ran during her first blood. She came back days later, barefoot and smiling, but never spoke again. Local legend blamed fairies. Scholars suggest mental illness, but the fear stuck. Last of all, your mother warns, never let a man see your ankles when it's raining. Why? No one knows. But girls who did were often wed before the next full moon. One theory. Rain turned mud to mirrors. Or maybe, just maybe, wet ankles look too much like vulnerability, and in this world, vulnerability is invitation. Your mother sighs. Her face softens. I say this because I love you. She whispers. You nod. Even if you don't understand. You will. Soon. Because tonight, your father mentions a boy. A visitor. Someone who might be a good match. Your stomach knots, even as you smile. Outside, the rain starts to fall. Your hands are still damp from the rain. You rub them together under the table, trying to quiet the tiny tremble that started when your father said the visitor's name, Othric. You've never met him, but you've heard the other girls whisper, and whispers in a medieval village carry more weight than church bells. Tonight, the warnings echo louder than the thunder. Your mother pours stew into your bowl, careful not to look you in the eye. That's another warning that doesn't need words. When she can't meet your gaze, it means decisions have been made without you. You sip slowly, tasting more salt than spice. Maybe it's the stew. Maybe it's the moment. By the hearth, your grandmother clears her throat. She hasn't spoken much since last year's illness left her thin and breathless. But when she does speak, it's always something you're meant to remember. Has she been warned about the mirror? She asks, voice like creaking wood. You freeze. The mirror, Your mother repeats, more to buy time than out of confusion. Don't play dumb. Grandmother snaps. Is old enough. Here it comes. Another warning. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval homes didn't have mirrors, not the way we do, and mirror was rare, expensive, reserved for the noble. But that didn't stop girls from finding their own, in still water, polished metal, the bottom of a ladle. And those reflections, they told more than faces. Grandmother leans in. If you see your face after dark, she whispers, and it blinks before you didn't marry for a year. You swallow hard. Because last week, at the mill pond, you swear your reflection smiled before you did. That's the first chill. But there's more. You've barely set down your spoon when your older cousin bursts through the door. Her cheeks are flushed. Her braid is loose. She looks wild and not in a way anyone approves of. Don't let them dress you in blue, she warns, skipping greetings. Not tonight. Blue, the color of purity. Virginity. Oh. But in your village, blue means something more. Something dangerous. Last winter, a girl named Mayalis wore blue at her betrothal dinner. That same night, a candle tipped. Her dress caught. Some say it was an accident. Others whisper that the blue cloth was cursed, that it burns faster than wool, hungrier than linen. Historians still argue whether certain dyes in medieval times carried toxins or superstitions. Indigo, for instance, was so expensive it often indicated status, but rural communities gave it weight far beyond wealth. Blue became a symbol and a scapegoat. Green is safer, your cousin insists, yanking a velvet scrap from her apron. Wear this instead. You take it, unsure. It smells like herbs and smoke and fear. You nod again, the way you've learned to nod when adults give you tools disguised as riddles. And then comes the softest warning yet. After the others, leave after the fire dies low and even the cat has curled into sleep, your little sister climbs into your bed. Her eyes are wide, and she clutches something in her fist. I heard them talking, she whispers. They said once you're promised, the midwife marks you. Your breath catches. The what? The midwife, she repeats. She pricks your heel with a silver pin while you sleep, so your feet won't wander after marriage. Ridiculous. A child's tale. A superstition. Or maybe not. Because in the village, just west, there's a girl who limps now. She never did before her wedding night. And you remember your mother telling her she should have stayed still. You lie awake long after your sister's breathing slows. Outside, the wind scrapes the shutters. Inside, you press the velvet scrap to your chest, wondering what color hope is supposed to be. Morning breaks slowly in the village, the kind of grey dawn where even the roosters sound reluctant. You rise not from rest, but from the weight of warning stitched into your dreams. Your feet touch the cold floor, and the first thing you do without meaning, toys glance toward the wash basin. No mirror. Just water in a cracked bowl, catching your reflection in ripples. You hold your breath. It blinks when you blink. Thank God. Downstairs, the house is already busy. The fire's been stoked. Your mother's kneading dough with a rhythm that speaks more to anxiety than hunger. And laid neatly over the chair by the hearth is a folded dress. Not blue. Not green. Brown. Plain. Scratchy. Safe. You run your fingers across it. There's a charm, stitched into the seam, barely visible, but unmistakable. A looped thread in the shape of an eye. Your grandmother's doing. You dress without complaint. In this house, silence is safer than protest. The dress itches, but you wear it like armor. As you chew through a stale crust of bread, your uncle's voice rumbles from outside. Here's coming. The visitor. Hot Rick. You've never seen him, but already you know what he looks like. That's how the village works. Stories sculpt a face long before the real one arrives. Broad shoulders. A mole near the mouth. One thumb broken from some boyhood fight. That's what they say. You step outside, and has none of those things. Is young. Hale. Sinewy. Not strong. His cloak is too fine for this road, and his shoes are clean, which means he didn't walk far, or someone carried him. He smiles too quickly. And that's worse than not smiling at all. Your mother nudges you forward. You curtsy. He bows. Lovely, he says, and it's not clear if he means you or the setting sun. You don't ask. Mainstream historical fact. In the Middle Ages, daughters were often betrothed for reasons of property, labour, or local alliance. The girls' preferences were rarely considered. Appearances could be deceiving, but obedience wasn't optional. You walk beside him down the path toward the village green, where the others pretend not to stare. Your cousin, the one who warned you about the blue, watches with narrowed eyes from the baker's stall. She doesn't smile. Tell me, Offric says, do you sing? I can, you reply, which is the same as saying you do. He laughs. Then you must sing something now. It's not a request. It's a test. So you hum an old lullaby one your mother sang when your sister was teething, one with words about wolves and walls. You keep your eyes on the horizon and hope he doesn't notice your voice shake. When it's over, he claps softly and then says the first thing that freezes your blood. My last wife didn't like singing. That didn't end well. Wait. Last. You glance at his hands. No ring. But then, few men wore them. He notices your silence. Smiles again. She ran away, he says. Or tried to. Fringe historical tidbit. Some medieval regions allowed annulments or separations, but for most women, escape from marriage was near impossible. Running away could mean exile, starvation, or worse. You nod, pretending you didn't hear the threat wrapped in the tale. When you return home, your mother meets you at the door with a cloth and wipes your cheeks without a word. It's not affection, it's ritual. Warding off what might have been seen. That night, after the stew is gone and the house hums low with bedtime sounds, your grandmother speaks again. There's one more thing. She beckons you close. Her breath smells like nettle tea. When he asks what you dream of, say nothing, she says. You frown. Why? Because they like their women empty, she replies. Easier to fill with their own stories. You climb into bed, turning those words over like stones in your mouth. Do not sing. Do not dream. Do not wear blue. And still, they say you're the lucky one. You sleep lightly, because that's what daughters do. Deep sleep is for children, or women already wed, those who've either not yet learned, or no longer need to. When the rooster cries, it's still dark. Your mother wakes you with a hand on the shoulder. Not harsh, not soft, just enough pressure to say, there are things to do today that will change your life forever. You dress without thought. The brown dress again. Same sleeves. Same charm stitched into the seam. The eye watches silently. In the corner, a folded kerchief with lavender tucked inside. You pin it behind your ear. You do not ask who placed it there. Downstairs, there's a hush. Even the fire crackles more gently. The table has been cleared, not just cleaned, but stripped of anything unessential. A bare plank now, with 2 mugs and a loaf in the middle. This is the day Offric returns. Not as a visitor, as something more. Your mother braids your hair, slow and tight. The strands pull at your scalp, each tug like a reminder. Be still, be pleasing, be chosen. You'll walk with him again, she says. This time, don't look away so much. You nod, but your throat is dry. At the door, your grandmother slips something into your hand, a small bone charm. It's warm, like it's been inside her sleeve all night. Keep your words sharp, she whispers, even if you don't speak them. Mainstream historical fact, many women in the Middle Ages used small tokens, charms, herbs, trinkets as forms of folk protection, especially during courtship, marriage, or childbirth. These objects were less about superstition and more about control in a world where they had so little. The path through the village is damp with dew. Offric waits at the crossroads, flanked by 2 men who smell like coin and clove. One holds his horse. The other holds a scroll. He smiles again, but his eyes scan your hands. May I take your arm? He asks. You hesitate. Then offer the one without the charm. Let him believe you have nothing hidden. Have you seen my home? He asks. You shake your head. Then ill describe it. He does. Rooms with rush-strewn floors, a hall with antlers on the walls, a sleeping chamber with stained glass that throws red across the pillows at dawn. You say nothing. You're not sure which part of the story is supposed to comfort you. And there's a cellar, he adds, for wine and privacy. You nod once. Then he leans closer, voice low. And a place for quiet wives. Fringe historical tidbit. In some noble homes, quiet rooms were rail cells, attics or underground spaces where disobedient women could be confined under the guise of rest, reflection or penance. Not all came out unchanged. The walk ends where the church begins. A few villagers gather near the stone wall, pretending to admire a goat. But their eyes flick to you. Not him. Tonight, Offric says, we'll announce our intent. You try to respond, but your voice catches. He mistakes it for shyness. That's good. He smiles. Modesty is becoming. He kisses your hand before he leaves, but only touches the fingertips. Later, when you're alone again, your cousin appears behind the bakery. Don't let him take your hair, she says suddenly. You blink. What? If he asks for a braid before the wedding, say no. Why? She leans closer, her whisper sharp as clove. Because the last girl who gave him one was buried in it. Historians still argue whether hair charms or tokens were symbolic of ownership or protection. Some say a braid offered was a pledge of loyalty. Others argue it was used to bind a promise that could not be broken. That night, the fire burns low, and your grandmother sits with her spinning. You know, she says without looking, some men like girls they can bend. And if I don't bend? You ask. Finally meets your eyes. Then break on your terms. You lie awake, the bone charm still in your palm, your hair still intact. And tomorrow waits like a locked door. Morning brings no comfortingly light. And light, in your world, is never just light. It is exposure, witness, the end of what was secret. Your dress today has a tighter bodice. Your mother laced it so snug you can barely draw breath to argue. That's by design. You'll sit with him today, she says, pressing your shoulder lightly. Let him see you work a spindle, pour ale, sweep a floor. You nod, but inside, something coils. It's not the tasks that frighten you. It's the performance of them. Because in this world, what you do is not enough. It must look effortless, feel silent, and appear grateful. At mid-morning, Offric enters. He smells of soap, pine, and expectation. Ayres brought his sister. Lady Ailyn is tall, straight-backed, and wears a veil so fine it catches the sunlight like cobweb. Not a question. You shake your head. Well, she continues, smoothing her skirts, then you've never learned the three unspokens. You tilt your head. She smiles, but her eyes remain cold. 1. Never correct your husband. He'll hear it as mockery, even when it's mercy. 2. Never cry in front of his steward. Servants carry stories faster than pigeons. And 3. She leans in. Never make your opinions known before your first child. Until then, you are potential, not person. You swallow hard. Behind her, your mother's hands tremble over a tray of cups. Mainstream historical fact, in many medieval households, especially noble or landed ones, women were expected to remain pliable until their value was proven, usually by successful childbirth. Until then, they were watched, corrected, and judged in near silence. Later that afternoon, your chores become theatre. You sweep the front step, letting the wind catch your hair just slightly. You ladle stew with one smooth motion, wrist flat, no splash. You laugh at something your uncle says, just enough volume to seem merry, not bold. He watches, and behind him, so does everyone else. That night, as twilight stretches its long fingers across the fields, you sit outside alone. The moon is nearly full, but pale, like it's unsure of itself. Your cousin finds you again. He asks Ailyn about your hips, she says, blunt as a knife. What did she say? She said, "They'll do." You look down at your lap, hands still holding your embroidery. A single drop of blood stains the cloth. You must have pricked yourself without knowing. Your cousin points at it. Hide that. Why? Because if he sees you bleed, he'll think you break easy. You press the cloth to your chest, as if to keep the blood in. Fringe historical tidbit: in several rural communities, girls were discouraged from showing signs of pain or weakness during betrothal. Bleeding from needlework, bruises from chores, even limping from blisters, these could be taken as omens of fragility, and thus, lower value. You return inside just before supper. Your grandmother places a piece of cloth in your hand, white, clean, folded. "You'll need this when the wedding's done," she says quietly. You feel the weight of the unspoken. The cloth is not for your hair, not for your tears, but for proof. Oh, what? Of damage, of compliance, of value, as others define it. Historians still argue whether the practice of displaying bloodied sheets after a wedding night was truly common across all social classes, or if it's been exaggerated in literature. Either way, the pressure on girls to prove their purity remained a haunting, real threat. That night, you dream of running barefoot through the woods. Branches claw your legs. A stream so cold it burns your feet. A sound behind you, like hooves, like breath, like judgment. And when you wake, the cloth is still in your fist, but your fingers are clean. For now. You rise before the sun. Not by choice. Your mother's hand on your shoulder is soft, but final. "There's much to do," she says, and the unspoken part is louder. "Today, you'll be watched." Oric's family is visiting again, this time with more eyes. His mother. His steward. Two women you don't recognize, whose jewelry clinks like quiet bells with every breath they take. They aren't here to talk. They're here to measure. Your steps. Your voice. Your yield. As you pour tea, one of them whispers something behind her hand. They're watching the way you kneel. You recall what your aunt once warned: never let your knees land with sound. A loud kneel means defiance. Or weakness. Or worse, lack of grace. You glide lower, no thump. The lady nods, faintly. Approval, perhaps, until your younger brother comes barreling in, mud on his feet and a frog in his hands. He shouts your name, and every face turns. Your cheeks burn, but you smile. Gently, silently. You take the frog, pat his head, and return to your place. They're still watching. Mainstream historical fact: in medieval noble families, potential brides were evaluated not just on lineage and degree, but on demeanor under pressure. How a girl reacted to small disruptions was considered a test of future patience, especially with children, servants, or misfortune. That afternoon, the women test you further. You're asked to identify spices by smell. You get nutmeg right. Cinnamon too. But the third you hesitate. Clove. Before you speak, you remember what your cousin said: if unsure, say nothing at all. They'd rather you be silent than wrong. You smile, bow your head, and say, "I've not had the pleasure of learning this one yet." Aylin's mother lifts her chin. "Better than guessing," she mutters. You pass. You feel like you lost something anyway. Later, your grandmother sits with you under the plum tree. She breaks a piece of honey cake, gives you half. "You did well," she says. "But you looked afraid." "I was." "You can't be. In 16. She nods. "And if you marry this year, you'll be old by next spring." You stare at her. Old. Your choices will shrink. Your body will tire. You'll carry more weight than you realize. You look at your hands. They already tremble from too much serving. Too little rest. Your grandmother continues, "So if you're to carry all that, at least learn to bend, not break." Fringe historical tidbit: some families taught daughters subtle resistance, gentle defiance cloaked in sweetness. A second sugar cube in tea. A step taken too slow. A glance held just a moment longer than polite. These were their whispered rebellions. Supper brings tension. Oric praises your embroidery. Your mother beams. But when he says, it would look finer framed, your uncle chimes in, she made it for her degree chest. Offrick's smile fades. A chest for herself? He asks, light but loaded. Your cousin kicks you under the table. You know the rule. Never be seen wanting anything just for you. You laugh. I suppose it could be for whoever ends up sleeping near it. Aylin snorts. Her mother sips her wine more slowly. And Offrick smiles again. Later that night, as stars thicken the sky, your cousin whispers, you turned it around. You exhale. But she leans in closer. Be careful, she warns. Charm is a flame. Too much, and they'll try to snuff it out. Or own it. Historians still argue whether young women of lower nobility had agency in subtle social games, or were simply reacting to rigid systems. Letters suggest some learned to wield charm like armor, but most found the edge too sharp to survive uncut. You fall asleep that night, holding the empty spice pouch. Clove. That's what it was. You'll never forget again. But still you feel like you learned the wrong thing. You wake to the sound of rain on slate soft but insistent, like 1,000 fingers tapping out an omen. Today is instruction day. Every 7th morning, your mother or grandmother teaches you something you can't afford not to know. That phrase again. It wraps around your bones like a belt pulled one notch too tight. Today's lesson. How to speak without being heard. It starts in the pantry. No louder than a kettle's breath. Your mother says, gesturing at the window fogged with morning mist. But clear. And certain. You practice with her. She walks 5 paces away, facing the shelves, and you whisper, he took 3 apples. She turns back. Again. He took 3 apples. Now say it so he'll hear if I want to but miss it if I don't. You try again. She nods. This could save you. You want to ask what from, but her eyes say enough. Mainstream historical fact, medieval women especially in noble or merchant households are often trained in the art of veiled speech. It wasn't just about modesty. It was survival. Knowing how to drop information without appearing gossipy could shape marriages, protect siblings, or shift entire household dynamics. Later, you sit with your grandmother. She has her thread basket out and begins stitching an owl onto your future veil. Why an owl, you ask? She lifts one brow. Because I'm not allowed to give you a knife. You both laugh, softly, and for a moment, your chest loosens. Then comes the second half of instruction day, the warning tales. She tells you of cousin Elaine, who laughed too much at a dinner and was sent to a convent before her embroidery was even folded. Of Marga, who refused to wake early for milking and was married to a man twice widowed. By 30, she was blind in one eye and had lost 6 children. Of Isabel, who fell in love with a piper. That one ends in silence. You don't ask. Some of us were warned, your grandmother says, and didn't listen. She places the finished owl in your palm. But most of us weren't warned at all. You wonder which is worse. Fringe historical tidbit. Some grandmothers stitched coded warnings into their granddaughters' linens. A blue thread running backward meant don't trust him. A bird with no eye meant he lies. Most girls never noticed. Some did and quietly changed their fate. That afternoon, you're sent to gather herbs with your Aunt Lynn. She's always been the quiet one, but today, she hums. What song is that? She shrugs. One I'm not allowed to sing. She hands you rosemary, for memory, and for protection. You wonder which you need more. Then, she hands you tansy. You pause. This is for she nods. And I should know this why. She tilts her head. Because you have 2 feet and a heart. And one day, you may want to go where no one else dares take you. You don't ask further. You dry the herbs in silence, letting the scent fill your sleeves. Historians still argue whether such knowledge of herbs, of signs, of silent resistance was formally passed or absorbed by proximity. Some journals suggest women created informal systems of survival, hidden in plain sight. Others say that view romanticizes the constant fear. That night, Aylin sneaks into your room. She's been crying. I heard them talking. About your degree. About me. She crumples beside your bed. You hesitate. Then braid her hair. She sniffles. I don't want this life. You answer with the softest words you've learned. I know. She looks at you. You said it just right, she whispers. So quiet I could forget the world. You hold her hand. And in that stillness, between girls wrapped in too much silk and not enough freedom, you realize the warnings weren't just for you. They're for anyone listening closely enough to hear them. You don't remember falling asleep, but you wake with Lynn still curled beside you, her braid coiled like a promise across the pillow. The candle stub is long gone. Only the soft blue of pre-dawn presses through the shutters, and with it, the sound of wheels on gravel. A cart. You both sit up. The day is the travelling friar's visit once a month. He comes bearing blessings, news from the next town, and for young women like you, a chance to be seen. Not heard, no. Never that. But seen well-dressed, well-mannered, observant. The kind of girl who wouldn't curse a family name. And that's when your mother hands you the blue ribbon. The good one. You're old enough, she says. The notice. Your throat tightens. Aylin turns away. Try not to think of it as a hunt. But it is. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval communities, travelling clergymen, peddlers or messengers played a dual role, spreading word of betrothals or offering subtle matchmaking cues. Families used such visits as quiet testing grounds for their daughters' demeanour, beauty and prospects. Your grandmother pins the ribbon into your hair. Don't look too long at anyone, she says. But don't look away too fast, either. You practice the look in her mirror. Neutral. Curious, but not eager. Gentle, not dim. There's a thud downstairs. The friar has arrived. He has kind eyes. That's the worst part. He asks your name, and you answer with the voice you've been trained to use. Soft, measured. A girl who knows scripture and doesn't ask too many questions. He nods, pats your hand. May the Lord guide your steps. You thank him. A perfect daughter. And then, as he turns, he presses a bundle into your hand, a scrap of parchment wrapped around dried orange peel. You glance at it hours later, when no one is watching. A spabbled prayer. A joke about nuns and chickens. Warning not to trust the man who will ask about your hands next week. You laugh. You panic. You fold the paper carefully into your sleeve. Fringe historical tidbit. Some travelling friars were unofficial messengers between women in isolated towns, passing gossip, warnings, even secret writings. These pocket sermons were rarely written in Latin, but rather in metaphors and domestic riddles only women would understand. Later that afternoon, you're sent to polish the candelabras. Your hands reek of beeswax. Your knees ache from the stone floor. And yet, in the stillness of the empty hall, you find a strange comfort. Until the steward enters. He asks about your hands. Just as the note warned. Red from labour, you reply, standing quickly. But steady. He nods slowly. You'll need steady hands for what's coming. You want to ask what? But you've learned. Questions can cost you. He leaves. You sit back, breath held. Aylin appears again that night. She hasn't spoken all day. I overheard them. Hez asking for you. The steward. She grips your wrist too tight. He asked about your eyes next. You want to believe she's wrong. But your stomach already knows the truth. So does the bundle of herbs hidden in your sewing box. So does the blue ribbon, now stuffed under your mattress like a swallowed lie. Historians still argue whether such quiet warnings between girls, women, servants formed a coherent underground of resistance or if they were just fragments. Some call it survival. Others call it domestic espionage. Most agree it was never recorded, because it wasn't supposed to be. That night, you lie awake, counting every ceiling beam like it's a gate you might slip through. Aylin whispers across the dark, if you run, I'll run. You whisper back, if I stay, I'll rot. And between you, the silence answers like an old song, you may never leave. But you're not alone. You don't run that night. But you don't sleep, either. By morning, something inside you is hardened like milk set into cheese, like wax cooled around a wick. You rise before the bell. dress before the sun. You tie your hair without the blue ribbon. Instead, you wrap it in simple linen. Your mother notices. She says nothing. That day, the steward returns. He brings with him a man dull eyes, too many rings, the air of someone used to buying things that don't talk back. This is Master Aldrich, the steward says. Interested. You nod. You smile. You measure your breath. Mainstream historical fact: young women in medieval households, especially of merchant or minor noble classes, were often presented for observation not necessarily by a suitor, but by his agents or intermediaries. Behavior was more important than speech, beauty more than belief. Aldrich comments on your posture. Your fingers. You're quiet. Promising, he says. The steward looks proud. She's been trained. You nod again. Then, politely, you excuse yourself. You may go, your mother says, too quickly. You retreat to the hallway, breath locked behind your ribs, and that's when you hear it a whisper from behind the wall. Aylin, pressed against the tapestry. He asked about me last year. You stare at her. But I was too mouthy, she says. They said no. Your heart pounds. She smiles sadly. Be mouthy, cousin. You don't answer. You just walk. To the kitchen, to the pantry, to the cellar. You pull back the sack of barley. Behind it, the dried herbs Lynn gave you. A pouch. And a bundle of letters tied in hair ribbon. All from girls. Girls you know. Girls you don't. Each one a warning. He likes them afraid. Don't go if it rains. He pays in coin, not kindness. Learn to fall without bruising. Your hands tremble. Fringe historical tidbit: in certain regions, hidden girl books, collections of notes, patterns and coded advice circulated between female relatives or servants. They contained not just recipes and prayers, but escape plans, trap warnings and alternative routes out of engagements. You hear footsteps above. You close the bag. Then you take one page, fold it into your bodice. It reads simply, never agree on a full stomach. You don't fully understand, but it steadies you. That night, you're told Aldrich will return in 3 days. He wants to see you again. Over supper. The house shifts. Lynn sues faster. Your mother hums tunelessly. The cat hides. Everything is quieter. You and Aylin walk the orchard at dusk. What if we made ourselves ineligible? She asks. Like? You say. She shrugs. Pretend we're sick. Or act stupid. Or say something unholy. You shake your head. That works once. Then they watch harder. She sighs. What? Then, you run your fingers along the bark of a twisted apple tree. We learn the game, you say. She nods slowly. And then, we change the rules. You both laugh. Quietly. Historians still argue whether young women like your half-daughters, half-hostages ever had a strategy, or whether small acts of sabotage were mere flickers in the dark. Some scholars say the girls were passive. Others believe every silence was chosen. Go to bed that night with the page tucked under your pillow. You dream of owls, and ribbons, and teeth. You wake with an idea. And a plan. You skip the porridge the morning Aldrich is to return. Instead, you drink warm water with vinegar and crush. Sagelin says it settles the belly. But really, you're testing something. You want to feel sharp. Empty. Watchful. When you step out into the courtyard, the sun is playing peekaboo with clouds. Your hair's bound tightly. No rings. No rouge. Just the linen dress stiff at the sleeves and the memory of those hidden letters pressing like armor beneath your skin. The bell rings once. Airs early. Your mother's hands flutter uselessly over your shoulders. Smile, she whispers. Just a little. You don't. You blink slowly and then take your place at the table. Mainstream historical fact: in many medieval customs, a second visit by a suitor was not for small talk. It was for testing compatibility, often over meals, walks, or mock domestic scenarios. The girl's behavior was noted by all present, especially by the steward, who might report back in writing. Aldrich seats himself with a grunt. He smells of oil and cloves. He starts with flattery, but your replies are clipped. Not rude, just unfinished. The way Lynn taught you to answer a drunk monk, enough to pass, not enough to stay. He offers you bread. You take the crust. He jokes about quiet girls making obedient wives. You spill a drop of wine. He frowns. Clumsy. He mutters. You lean forward, eyes wide. In sorry. I was lost in the way you speak. He likes that. Of course he does. Quirky fringe tidbit, some girls were trained to feign flattery and incompetence in precise combinations, a pattern called feather caging. It was meant to signal harmlessness, while subtly boring or frustrating the suitor out of interest. You ask about his travels. He boasts. You ask about his previous wives. He pauses. Then shrugs. None lived long. Sickly things. Your mother gasps. You nod slowly. I hope I'm not sickly. You let the silence stretch. He doesn't like silence. So, you smile just a twitch. I've never fainted in church, you add. Or choked on fish bones. He blinks. It's a strange moment. You can feel Aylin watching from the gallery. Lynn pretends to sweep. Even the cat seems to freeze in the doorway. Would you excuse me a moment? You ask sweetly. You leave the table. You don't run. You glide. You walk past the cellar, past the rain barrels, to the old dovecote. Inside, the air smells of feathers and dust and freedom. And tucked behind the fourth brick, one Aylin marked last summer is the other pouch. The real one. Inside, a pair of soft shoes, a coin, a folded map, and the small curved blade Lynn used to prune the bitter herbs. Your pulse hammers. You're not leaving. Not yet. But you want him to see the cage door open. Historians still argue whether girls in the late Middle Ages ever truly had escape plans or if these were just stories they whispered to each other to feel strong. What is clear, records of vanished daughters exist, their names struck from grey books, and sometimes the stewards simply stopped returning. You come back to the table. Aldrich is chewing meat with crooked teeth. You sit. Sip water. Forgive the delay. You say, sometimes forget I have to return. He doesn't get it. That's the point. You meet his eyes just long enough, and you whisper, I don't get sick often, but I do bite when cornered. Lynn drops her broom. Your mother goes pale. But Aldrich laughs. He thinks it's a joke. You know it's a test. Because if he laughs, he doesn't see you. And that means you're winning. The house smells like rain and wax when you wake the next morning. There's a letter folded beneath your wooden comb. Not sealed, just tucked. The ink is slanted and faint. Aylin's handwriting. He'll propose by week's end. If he does, say yes. You read it twice. Then flip the page over. 3 faint scratches on the back. Planner. You know what that means. Planner means the wedding will happen. But so will the rest. It's raining softly when you walk the perimeter of the garden. Lynn follows, pretending to gather mint. She said yes in the letter, you whisper. Lynn nods once. She means to use the gatehouse. Lynn doesn't reply. But she offers you a twist of dried plum. Which means yes. You chew. Slow. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval manors, the gatehouse was the only point not watched from the central keep, especially if guards rotated on odd hours. It was also where waste was burned, so no one paid much attention to smoker smell. You stop at the fence post and touch the iron ring buried there. It's cold. It's real. Aylin swore she'd make it look like an accident. A broken shoe. A lost step. Grieving bride. You whisper, I don't want her to risk that. Lynn says nothing, but she tilts her chin. Look. You follow her gaze, and there, just barely peeking from the herb shed roof, is a white scrap of cloth. One dot of blue. It flaps once. Quirky fringe tibbet. Some medieval households used color-coded cloths as signals, like primitive flags. One of the lesser-known systems included wedding sabotage signals: white for delay, blue for false illness, red for escape at nightfall. You return inside. Your mother is humming, threading embroidery floss. She says, "Here's asked for Sunday." You nod. You say, "I want lavender in my bath that morning." She beams. She thinks you've accepted. You have on the surface. But inside you're bracing. Not for Aldrich. For the look. Because the next warning doesn't come in words. It comes in the face of a woman who's seen too much. And the woman is waiting for you. Lady Isolde arrives with 2 ladies in waiting. She smells of myrrh and crushed berries. Her dress rustles like secrets. You curtsy deep. She lifts your chin with a finger. "Such a soft face," she murmurs. "Do you sleep well?" You don't answer. "Ah." She smiles. "That's all right." You follow her to the upstairs chamber. Hello. She draws the curtains. And then, without ceremony, she says, "Men like Aldrich choose girls who say nothing." You blink. She continues. Because they think silence is weakness. But they forget so did our mothers, our grandmothers, and all the girls who came before. She kneels, opens a carved box. Inside, a belt, metal links, hooks, leather. "Your wedding gift," she says. You hesitate. "It's for you," she adds, "to protect what's yours, and to remind him what's not his unless given." Historians still argue whether chastity belts were real, widespread, or symbolic. But many agree that some were gifted by older women not to restrict, but to empower. A quiet signal. A form of armor. Lady Isolde stands. "Smile at him," she says. "Laugh, even. But never mistake courtesy for surrender." She leans close, and if he ever raises his hand, look at his shadow, not his eyes. Aim there. Shadows don't lie. You nod once. Tightly. When she leaves, the chamber feels both larger and smaller. You lie on the bed. You trace the links in the belt. You whisper, "Plan A." Or Plan B. The breeze stirs the curtain. The herb shed roof still has the white cloth, but the edge is torn. A signal. The plan has changed. The night before the wedding, no one sleeps. At least, not honestly. The house is hushed, but the walls murmur with preparation. Steam hisses from boiling cloth, needles whisper through silk, and the hearth never dims. Your mother carries a tray of dried figs and honeyed almonds to your chamber, then vanishes behind the scent of lavender and tears she won't let fall. You sit alone, hair unbound, staring at your reflection. It doesn't feel like you anymore. It feels like something being prepared, like a sacrificial fawn dressed in ribbons. A soft knock. You know the rhythm. 3 taps. 1 pause. 2 more. There. You open the door silently. She slips in, bare feet, cloak damp from rain. She's gone, she whispers. The herb shed is empty. Your heart slams once. Gone? Lynn nods. Took the gatehouse path. Left before supper. Did she say why? No. Just this. From beneath her cloak, Lynn pulls a ribbon. Hail lilac. A single silver pin threaded through the knot. It's not much. But you know exactly what it means. Mainstream historical fact, in some noble households, sisters or close companions developed symbolic systems of communication, using ribbons, pins, and brooches to indicate danger, timing, or permission, especially when speech could be monitored. You hold the ribbon like a message made of silence. Silver pin means delay. Lynn says, she's not calling it off. Just, not tomorrow. You nod. But the guests arrive at sunrise. She looks at you. Then, you need a reason. You think fast. Sickness, they'll call a physician. Fear, they'll force you anyway. You glance at the tray of almonds. An idea blooms. Milk, you whisper. He'll drink milk before dawn. Say it upset my stomach. No physician will find fault in that. Lynn stares, then grins. Genius. Quirky fringe tibbet, cow's milk, when slightly soured, was often used as a subtle self-induced emetic in the Middle Ages. Women used it to mimic illness, delay ceremonies, or avoid forced intimacy without suspicion. You turn back to the mirror. Lynn sits beside you, pulls a comb through your hair slowly, tenderly. You scared? She asks, terrified. A pause, but not of Aldrich. She nods. You both understand. It's not the man, it's the life. At dawn, the birds are still asleep. Drink the milk in one long, steady pull. By the second hour of morning, your skin turns pale, and your stomach begins to churn. Your mother wails softly. The ceremony is postponed. A day. Maybe two. Enough time for Aelin. The something. You're moved to the west wing to rest. The bed is softer. The windows, smaller. A woman in grey watches you from the corner. But you don't speak. You dream of knots, of tiny, clever fingers braiding stories into ribbons. You wake to a storm. Not rain, just wind. Furious, howling wind that pushes open shutters and moans through chimney flues. And through the roar. Knock. Not the rhythm of Lynn. Not the hush of your mother. But a new code. A tap, a pause, a scratch. 3 times. You rise. You open the door and find a boy. No older than 12. Mud on his cheeks, an envelope in his hand. For you, he mutters. Inside the envelope, gatehouse, midnight, no ribbons. Just run. No signature. Just a single petal pressed between the folds. Lavender. Historians still argue whether noble daughters in the Middle Ages ever orchestrated full-fledged escapes before their weddings, or if the records were suppressed, disguised as death, or erased altogether. But there are letters, faint and hidden, that suggest otherwise. You hide the note beneath your mattress. You count the hours. By sunset, you are again feverish. No one questions your silence. No one sees the boots hidden beneath your robe. No one knows Lynn slipped you flint in your sleeve. When the wind howls its loudest, you move. Through the corridor. Down the back stair. Past the room with the empty cradler that never got used. And into the rainless dark. The gatehouse looms ahead. One torch flickers. Aelin waits. But not alone. You slow your steps as the gatehouse rises like a shadow stitched from stone and dread. Aelin stands just beyond its threshold, lantern-hooded, her cloak soaked through but her face dry calm in that dangerous, determined way that makes you remember why she was always your sister and never just your cousin. But the figure beside her. Toe. Cloaked in traveller's wool, boots muddied, one hand resting lightly on the hilt of a curved dagger. He turns slightly at your approach. You said she'd come. He murmurs to Aelin. She always does. She replies. You open your mouth, but no sound comes. Aelin steps forward. This is Corin. My courier. And your way out. You blink. To where? To the convent at Low Glen. Corin answers. They owe your grandmother a favour. Mainstream historical fact. In the Middle Ages, noble families sometimes forged secret pacts with abbeys or convents to shelter runaway daughters or widows. These sanctuaries operated in legal grey zones, especially when tied to ecclesiastical immunity. You glance over your shoulder. Not at the manor. At the future you were supposed to accept. You take the step. And I trust him? You ask softly. Aelin meets your eyes. No, but I trust you to know when to run. That's enough. He hands you a bundle of bread, dried pears, a flask, and the ribbon. The lash. But now, the silver pin is gone. Just 3 knots. You remember what it means. Final path. No return. No regret. You swallow. Corin nods. We leave now. They'll search the main roads at dawn. And you? Aelin shrugs. Ill cry. Loudly. She smiles. And for a moment, despite the wind, the dark, the weight of every unwritten law, you almost laugh. Almost. Then, you run. Through nettled paths, over broken stone fences, past the old watchtower where childhood dares were once shouted to the moon. Your breath becomes fog. Your fear becomes fuel. And behind it all drumming hooves. Far off, but coming. Faster. Corin urges. We reach the glen before light. You don't ask how he knows the way so well. You don't ask why the glint in his eyes feels half like pity, half like memory. You just follow. By the 4th hour, your legs burn. Your slippers are gone lost in muck. The rain returns in whispers, not torrents, just enough to slick the trail, blur your vision, and smear your path. Well, rest at the stones, Corin says. 5 minutes. You collapse beside an ancient Markalichen cupboard, barely legible. But you trace the carvings anyway. A woman. Arms raised. No crown. No chains. Just herself. Who is she? You whisper. Corin doesn't answer at first. Then, some say a queen who refused her crown. Others say a liar who fled justice. Historians still argue whether she was real or legend. You nod slowly. He'll take legend. He smirks. So would she. Quirky fringed Tibet, in borderlands folklore, stone effigies of unnamed women were often left by roadsides as warnings or blessings to other travellers. Their stories were passed down orally, often shaped by the biases of the teller. You sleep for 4 minutes. Not rest. Just silence. And then hounds. Far. But not far enough. Corin curses under breath. They're hunting too soon. We move, now. You rise on aching knees. You've never run for more than a minute in your life. You run for 5. By dawn, your dress is shredded, and your lungs have turned to ash. Low glen is ahead, a cluster of stone and bell and smoke. A bell rings once. Corin whistles. From the tree line, 2 women appear, own middle age, the other young but with eyes that look older than stone. They nod at you. No words, just arms outstretched. You stumble into their embrace. Corin steps back. You turn. You're not coming? I'm not the daughter who fled, he says. And with that, he vanishes into the morning fog. The taller woman leads you into the convent. They give you warm broth. A robe. A room with no lock. They ask no questions. Only, would you like to pray? You say no. But you close your eyes anyway. And for the first time in your life you dream your dream. Not theirs. Back at the manor. They search the river first. Then the cliffs. Then the midwife's cottage. But they never find the girl. Only a lilac ribbon caught in a thorn bush, 3 knots tight and unmoving. They say she ran. They say she was taken. They say many things, but no one says her name. Not again. You wake not to bells or commands, but to the low murmur of wind weaving through stone corridors. The convent smells of dried sage, beeswax, and something else, old pages, maybe. A peace you've never known soaks into your bones like warm tea into cracked porcelain. There's no knock. Just a gentle creak as Sister Mary, the younger of the 2 women, enters your cell with a basin of water and folded linen. Still here? She teases. You nod. I think so. She smiles without looking. We don't always stay where we're told, but we do stay where we're needed. She leaves the door ajar behind her. You find the garden by accident, walled, but wide, overgrown but not wild. Vines clutch the bricks like tired hands. In the center stands a statue, faceless from centuries of rain, still upright. You run your fingers along the cracked marble. I used to think he'd marry a man with a sword, you whisper. Sister Lyra, the older nun, appears behind you, pruning nettles with shears. Most of us did, she says, until we learned the blade cuts both ways. You smile faintly. Mainstream historical fact, many medieval convents became refuges not only for devout women but also for noble daughters, widows, and even escaped brides. These sanctuaries offered quiet resistance to the strict roles imposed by feudal marriage systems. Lyra gestures to the roots. The world grows wild, child. You just have to find the places it doesn't reach. You nod. But your thoughts drift not back to the manor, but to Ailyn. You picture her feigning tears, playing the dutiful niece, slipping coins to stable boys and misdirecting guards. You owe her. Some day, you'll send word. But not yet. Days fold like parchment. You sue, but not for a degree. You read, but not for approval. You speak, but never in whispers. And at night, under wool blankets in a stone room with no key, you remember how it felt to choose. You don't know what tomorrow brings, but it's yours. Then, one afternoon, a knock at the convent gate startles the hens and hushes the wind. Mary peers through the slot, exchanges whispers. She returns pale. Messenger. Scroll from the manor. Sealed with black wax. Your hands freeze over your embroidery. Black wax. Used only for mourning. You break the seal. Reg. And sit. Ailyn is gone. Thiever, they say. 3 days. No suffering. A lie. You know it's a lie. She wouldn't fall without sending word. Without a code. You read again. Then again. But there's no ribbon. No mark. Just a name. A condolence. And silence. Open scholarly debate phrase. Historians still argue whether deaths in noble households, especially of women, were accurately recorded or manipulated for political convenience. Some believe entire chapters of personal histories were erased in service of reputation and legacy. You spend the evening alone in the chapel. No prayers. Just questions. Why here? Why now? But you know the answers. Because she acted. Because she mattered. Because she chose you over survival. The next morning, you rise before dawn. Slip past the chapel, the garden, the wall. You find a patch of mossy stone and bury the scroll. No tomb. No marker. Just a whisper. She lived free. A breeze lifts the hem of your robe, and just for a moment it smells of lilac. Back inside, Sister Lyra finds you brushing dirt from your hands. She wouldn't want you to stop, she says. In not stopping, you answer. In starting, she tilts her head and sees it in your eyes. A plan. The future. Maybe even a vow. By week's end, you've asked to join the convent not as a guest, but as a sister. They ask why. You don't answer with scripture. You answer with story. Of a girl raised to obey. Who was taught that silence is grace. That beauty is currency. That freedom is danger. Tell them about ribbons. And secrets. And a cousin who lied to save your life. They nod. And accept. 1 year later, a new girl arrives trembling, barefoot, wedding veil still clinging to her shoulder. You take her hand. Say nothing. Just press a lilac ribbon into her palm. 3 knots. Tight. Certain. And walk her inside. Quirky fringe tidbit. In oral traditions passed down in border regions of Europe, stories of the sisterhood of ribbons persisted tales of women who helped each other escape forced marriages, leaving coded markers in hems, veils, and garden paths. While likely apocryphal, they reflect enduring yearnings for solidarity and agency. You breathe in the scent of old wood and pressed petals as you step into the scriptorium. Quills scratch like distant rainfall and light filters in through narrow windows, illuminating dust like stars. You've been here for months now, yet every day still tastes of beginning. The girl you welcomed, her name is Bride, sits hunched at a bench nearby, learning her letters. She has stopped flinching at closed doors. That is progress. They let you teach. Not officially. Not yet, but when Lyra has other duties, you sit with the new girls, helping them shape letters, stitch seams, find rhythm in silence. Sometimes you even tell stories, the ones they whisper about in the cold spaces between sleep and dawn. Stories of daughters who dared, of ribbons that vanished, of footsteps in the snow that never turned back. They ask if it's all true. You say it was true enough to matter. One afternoon, a travelling friar stops at the convent. Dust on his boots, suspicion in his eyes. He eats little, speaks less. But then, during evening prayer, he lingers, watching, listening. Afterward, he approaches Lyra with a question that chills the room. There's talk, he says, of runaway girls, of noble daughters who disappear. Some say they come here. Lyra doesn't blink. Some say many things. He presses. If you harbour them, you break oaths. You defy fathers, lords, kings. Lyra turns slowly and gestures to the wall behind her. Then let them hang me beside every mother who ever smuggled her child to safety, she says. He doesn't return. But others do. More girls, more ribbons, more stories that begin in darkness and end in morning light. You begin to write. Not scripture, not doctrine, but memories. Aylin's laugh. Your mother's quiet fear. Brida's first moment of peace. Mainstream historical fact. While official church doctrine often upheld patriarchal norms, many convents served as informal networks of refuge, learning, and solidarity, especially among women who had no other safe place in the feudal structure. You compile letters that were never sent, rites that were never performed. And you write about secret zones whispered in cellars, braided into hair, stitched into sleeves, not to preserve them, but to share them, to warn, to warm, to wake. You're older now. Not old, but older, enough to feel the ache in your knees and the weight of remembering, but also the joy of watching Brida walk confidently through the cloister, helping a girl even younger than she was. She now carries her own ribbon, a ring, 2 knots. The symbol has evolved, but the spirit, unchanged. On the anniversary of Aylin's death, you plant a lilac sapling in the far corner of the garden. Brida helps, without asking questions. You leave no marker. Just the petals. A note inside the roots. She made room for me. No one reads it, but the tree does. It blooms faster than expected. Some say it's a miracle. You say, of course it is. Open scholarly debate phrase. Some historians believe such miracles of flowering trees or unexplained health among convent members were fabricated to secure donations or canonizations. Others argue they reflect a deeply psychological healing power found in safe, affirming spaces, especially for women under medieval pressures. You keep writing. You teach Brida to write, too. And one day, she copies your first page and adds something new at the end. Her name. In large, careful script. And below it, a single line, we choose. You smile. And add your own name beside it. Not the one from the manor, but the one you chose here. No lord gave it to you. No priest blessed it. No man approved it. And it's perfect. Now, every time a new girl arrives, you give her parchment and ink. Write what they told you, you say. Then burn it. They stare. Then write. Then burn. Then begin again. You call it rebirth. They call it freedom. But it's really the same thing. In the final weeks of autumn, as leaves curl into gold, you hear rumours: new kings crowned, old houses fallen, lands seized. But none of it touches your world. The convent stands. The garden blooms. The girls learn. And the ribbons keep arriving. Some from as far as the coast. Others from deep within forests where peasants dare not speak names aloud. But the message is clear. They're choosing. And you. You chose long ago. Twilight stretches over the stone paths one evening. Brida finds you watching the lilac tree. Its petals, somehow, are still clinging in the wind. She stands beside you. Do you ever wish it ended differently? You think. And say, it didn't end. She nods. And in the silence that follows, you hear it: not bells, not commands, but laughter. Steps. ink scratching, fabric torn and mended, the sound of daughters, living.